apartment education. We don't solicit any deals. We don't present any opportunities. There are invitations to future calls and different things that we do, but the whole core purpose of these calls is to educate you as the investor. Because the more educated you are, you know what questions to ask, then you'll know what appropriate moves to make when investing in multifamily real estate. So I got a few partners on my team on this call. The other image of Dallin Schultz, of that, just the image, the still shot, that is our assistant, Hillary. She's logged into my account. So she's been incredible at following up when we provide free resources, or if we're looking to schedule calls and podcasts. She's done a phenomenal job with that. We also have Paul, who's our director of project and systems, and he makes sure everything within the company is flowing smoothly. And then we have Aaron Wyas with us today, who's our investor relations manager. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of conversations and connections that need to be made. So Aaron is there to connect with people one-on-one. So if he reaches out to you via text or call or email just to schedule a call, first and foremost, it's just to make sure that we have alignment there. And he's just trying to connect you, better understand your needs. Because if we're not a good fit for you, we have a pretty extensive network that we can recommend and suggest. So we got a few of them on the call. Excited for another weekly webinar here. So as stated before, these webinars, we've condensed them down to 30 minutes. An hour can be a lot of time, and we could cover so much material. We'd rather condense them down and be more hyper-focused on smaller specific items within the apartment investing space. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and talk about value add business plan and what that is. If you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat box. We'll be monitoring that, and then we'll also open it up for a Q&A afterwards. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we got the value add business plan. There's different strategies when it comes to apartment investing, and the one that we focus on at Rev is the value add play. And in order to better understand that, I think it's important to touch on some basic formulas here. So one of the most basic formulas in determining the value of an apartment asset, you take the NOI, the net operating income, and you divide it by the cap rate. Is this too small? Are you guys able to see this okay? Ram, can you see this okay? Okay, thanks. So your net operating income, to determine that, it's simply your income less your expenses gives you your net operating income. Now, important thing to note on this does not include your debt service. So if you have a loan on that property, that is not factored into this equation. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. So with cap rate, to determine that, you take your NOI, your net operating income, you divide it by your sales price. And that gives you your cap rate. Now, we'll break this down a little bit more, but important thing to recognize in determining the value of a property, you got two factors. You got your net operating income and you have your cap rate. Your net operating income, we as operators, we have control of this because it's based on the income and the expenses. If we increase the income and we decrease the expenses, what we're going to do is we're going to increase this NOI. And we're going to factor this into a couple other equations here. But the important thing to understand is that with the NOI, we have control of it. We have control of that, and we can force the value, we can force the appreciation. Now, with the cap rate, this we do not have control of, because this is based on the market. The market determines what your cap rate is. Okay. So, for example, let's take, I'm going to need a volunteer, so I'm going to call somebody out here, get your phone. Casey, do you got a phone handy, or are you on it? Oh, we got you muted. You're muted, Casey. Looks like you're on your phone. Okay. So let's, Jonathan, are you able to help me out here for a minute?
I'm good to go now. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Excellent. All right, Casey, go ahead and open up your calculator on your phone for me.
I've got it.
Okay. So let's say your net operating income is 100,000, and you purchase a property for 2 million. Okay. So we got an NOI of 100,000, and then we purchase a property for 2 million. So do that math for me if you could real quick. 100,000 divided by 2 million, and let me know what you get.
0.05 or a 5 cap.
Okay, 0.05 or 5%. So that property, if it was producing a net operating income of $100,000 and you paid $2 million for that property, it would be producing a 5% cap rate. Another way to look at this, if you were to pay $2 million cash and you had no debt on it at all, you paid $2 million cash, it was producing 100,000 a year, you could expect a 5% return on your money. Okay. The thing is, and we're not going to get into it too much. We won't get into it at all. This will be on another webinar where we talk about financing and debt and leveraging it. Because what happens is people will come in, they'll leverage this 2 million, and the property will actually produce a higher return than that 5% because they're using cheaper capital through leverage and through banks. So that's a whole nother thing we can get into on another webinar. But again, just understanding how the cap rate is determined and understanding that we don't have control of that. The market will determine that, because people will either come in and they'll buy that property for more or they'll buy it for less. And so the cap rate fluctuates based on what the market is doing. Okay. NOI, we have control of. Cap rate, we do not have control of. It is what it is. Okay. Before I move on past this, any questions evolving around this? Okay, I think we're good. All right, so let's talk about we'll take some examples through this value formula. So let's say we have a property that's generating 150,000 in income, and it costs 50,000 to operate that. So again, income minus expenses gives you your NOI. That gives us an NOI of $100,000. And let's just assume that the cap rate in this market is 5%. So again, in order to figure out the value, take your NOI divided by the cap rate. You got your 100,000 NOI divided by your 5% cap rate. Casey, would you mind doing that one for me as well?
Okay, say that again. The
100,000 divided by 0.05 or 5%.
2 million.
2 million. Okay. So based on this formula, this property is going to be worth $2 million. Again, value add business plan. We have control of the income and the expenses. So let's assume you increase the income to 165,000 and you decrease the expenses to 40,000. So again, income goes up, expenses go down. Your new NOI is $125,000. So you just boosted the NOI by $25,000. Let's assume the cap rate remains the same. Casey, would you mind doing that formula for me? So 125,000 divided by the 5%.
$2.5 million.
Yeah, 2.5 million. I
Okay.
apologize. My speaker's not working right.
Not a problem. I'm putting you on the spot. Thanks, Al, for jumping in. Okay. So we increase the NOI by 25,000, but when it's factored into this formula, you just increase the property value by $500,000. You forced that appreciation. That is how you maintain control in these value add type of business plays. You go in, you increase the income, you decrease the expenses. That overall increases the NOI. You force that value 3 to 5 years on average. You turn around and you sell it, and all the investors capitalize on that opportunity. This, in a nutshell, is a value add business plan. And I'll be honest, this is what sold me on apartments. Because at the end of the day, you're buying a business. A single family home, okay, let's use that for an example, because a lot of people will start investing in single family. I don't think it's a bad option. I just think there's better options. In a single family home, you can't force the appreciation. And what I've heard and what people come back with, and they're like, well, what about a flip? Okay, a flip, you're not forcing the appreciation. You're taking an extremely distressed property and just bringing it up to market value. You're buying it at a discount, putting in some work, and selling it at market value. The market takes a dip when you're mid-construction. Good luck trying to sell it for what you were projecting. And this happened to a lot of people 12 months ago. As soon as the capital market started shifting and they were mid-flip, they got themselves into trouble because they weren't able to sell for what they thought they'd be able to, because single family homes are based solely on the market and what people are willing to pay for them. So that still affects multifamily here, right? Cap rate, market still affects it, but we still have control with the NOI. So even if the market fluctuates, we can still prove that this property is worth more because of how much income it generates. It's a business. Apartments are a business that are valued based on how much income they can generate. So when operators come in, this is what they're focusing on: income and expenses to drive that NOI. I know it looks simple and sounds simple on here. When it's actually put into work, it is extremely difficult because there's a lot of moving parts. So what I want to do next, as we wrap this up in the next few minutes before we open it up for Q&A, I want to talk about this baby right here: income. And what I'm going to break down is a lot of different areas where you can drive income on these properties. Because expenses, if you're vertically integrated, you can cut down on expenses. If you're using third-party management, if you're using third-party contractors to do a lot of the renovations, your expenses are pretty set in stone. There's not too much fluctuation that you can manage with those. So what I wanted to do was really focus on the income, because if you can drive the income and implement some efficiencies on expenses, then you'll be in decent shape. So before I get into that, any comments or questions about what we reviewed here in these first few minutes? Okay, looks like there is one in the chat box. Is there a good resource for determining the cap rate of a specific area? For example, if I'm looking into properties in Houston, is there a way to know what the cap rate for that market is? You talked the quickest way, Amanda, great question, by the way. Quickest way to determine this is to talk to a broker or a property manager in that area, especially a broker, because they're going to have a history of what the properties are selling for, and they'll be able to know that right off the top of their head. And then you could just do some of your own due diligence as well, looking into what properties are selling for and the amount of income that they're generating. But if you're just trying to determine a cap in that area, a quick phone call to a property manager or broker, you'll figure that out real quick. Or other operators in that area as well. Excellent.
Hey, Dallin,
Yeah.
would you mind just not really digging into, but talking about how we underwrite that cap rate through the hold of the property? What do we predict the cap rate doing throughout those 5 to 7 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's appropriate to touch on real quick. So if there's one number that I could direct all of you to take a look at when underwriting a deal, it is 100% the cap rate. Because if this changes just a little bit, it can significantly change the outcome of that property. And I'll show you what I mean. So value, NOI divided by cap rate, right? So when you're looking at cap rate, a good rule of thumb, and let me back up. As cap rates increase, values decrease. It's an inverse correlation. Cap rates increase, values decrease. And we can walk through that in this formula here, but that'll take a little bit more time. I just wanted to understand cap rates go up, values go down. Cap rates go down or they compress, the value of that property is going to go up. So when underwriting a deal, when you're looking at a property, let's say in year one, this group is purchasing it at a 5% cap rate. Conservative underwriters, when they're looking at deals, will work in a reversion cap, meaning if we buy it in year one for 5%, even if cap rates are going down, you want to look for an upward trend. And a general rule of thumb is 10 to 15 basis points per year. So for example, year one purchase, it's 5%. Year two, we'll just do 10 basis points to keep things simple. 10 basis points is 0.10. Year three, 5.2%. 4, 5.3, in year 5, 5.4%. Okay. And actually, I did this incorrectly. Purchase is going to be right here at 5%. So year one is going to be 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and so on. This reversion cap rate shows a conservative underwriting. And to model that here, let's walk through this formula. We have value, NOI divided by cap rate. So in the previous example I shared with you, we changed the NOI, but we didn't change the cap rate. So let's swap that. Let's change the cap rate and not change the NOI, okay? So we'll use the same numbers, 100,000 divided by 5%. We know that that's a $2 million value. Let's say the market eased up, and it has. Over the last 12 months, it's eased up. So these cap rates actually went up. So let's say you have the same 100,000, but given the cap rate, let's say it's just changed 20 basis points. So we'll say it went up to 5.2%. Can somebody do that math for me? 100,000 divided by 0.052.
$1.923 million, roughly.
We'll just say 1.92, right? Okay. So that property decreased in value by $80,000 just because of a 20 basis point change in the cap rate. So this is important to understand, because if you're going into a property and they're saying, hey, we're purchasing it at a 5% and we're planning on selling it at 4.5%, they're coming across very aggressively. They're banking on the market continuing to compress. Don't bet on the market. Do not bet on the market. When it comes to the NOI, bet on that. Bet on the business plan. Bet on the forced appreciation with the NOI. With the market, be very conservative. And so when you're looking at deals, general rule of thumb, whatever it's purchased at, when they plan to exit, 10 to 15 basis points per year. Is that what you were looking for, Paul? Paul's driving. So any questions about this? We can have a whole entire webinar just on cap rates itself and how it affects deals, but hopefully this was a good introduction to it. Cool. All right. So what I want to do here in the last few minutes is talk about income. When we think of driving income, the very first thing that we think of as operators typically is rent. You go in, you renovate the unit, and you bump the rent 100, 125, 150. Sometimes if it's a big turn, you're bumping rent $300 to $400 per month. That's a massive value add play. So rent is probably the most common one. And now what I'm going to share with you under this dotted line, there's this line item on the financials of these deals called other income. This is where a lot of the potential can sit in a value add play, especially in markets where rent, you may not be able to drive it $200, $300, $400. You might only be able to drive it $100, $150. So how do you continue forcing the appreciation and the value? And it's with this other income. So I'm going to share with you some of these items. And again, these are things for you to look into when you're getting into a deal. If somebody's only banking on the rent and they're not capitalizing on other income opportunities, that could be lost potential. That could be lost value on the property. So one of my favorites here, and this is pretty common now across the board, is pet rent. People will charge a deposit up front and then maybe $20 to $30 a month per animal. And people will pay this all day long because they're animals. People that have these fur babies, it's often their kids or in place of kids, right? So people will pay that pet rent all day long. Now, not everyone's going to have a pet. And what a lot of communities are doing is, yes, they're charging pet rent, but they're putting in really nice pet parks as well. A nice fenced in grass area where the animals can run around, play. There might be obstacles, and it keeps the stuff that pets often leave behind contained where they can clean it up. So there's pet rent. Another one you might see is covered parking. Now, this is huge in sunshine states, Texas, Arizona, Florida. They have these big metal canopies. Previous operators may not be charging for that. So you can charge a premium, you can charge an extra $20, $30 a month. You can get a designated covered parking spot for your vehicle, and people will pay that. This is a newer one that I've heard of, and I'm sure other people are implementing it, but I thought this was a brilliant idea, and it's reserved parking. So there's this group we're partnering with in San Antonio, and they'll offer reserved parking. And all they do is they pick out a spot close to that tenant's apartment, and they stake in a sign that says reserved for this unit number. And tenants, a lot of these parking lots are massive. You get into a 200, 300, 400 unit complex, these parking lots are massive. And so people like the luxury of being able to park right up next to their unit. And so they're actually implementing reserved parking, and they put in a sign, a post in that parking spot, or maybe they'll spray paint the number in the parking spot, and people will pay for that. You'll also see an amenity fee. And the amenity fee, that can cover the pool area. People are starting to hang up hammocks, grill areas. A lot of operators are putting in package lockers for UPS and FedEx and Amazon. So when people are ordering stuff online, it's not getting shipped to a post office that then they have to go to. It's being delivered right there at the property in the storage locker. So since you're providing that amenity and some other things, you can charge an amenity fee. And most of these are probably going to be between $20 to $50 a month. Not all of them are going to apply, and not every tenant is going to use every single one. But these are examples that I'm sharing with you of ways you can drive other income if it makes sense for that property. What you're seeing too is a smart home package. Tenants love this. When they have a wireless lock on their front door that they can lock remotely from their phone, and they have a thermostat inside that they can adjust, they love that. And if you put that in, you can charge a little smart home package fee to cover the, part of that amenity and that feature. You'll see some properties with garages or storage units. Some operators may not be renting those out. They might just be gifting them or including it in the rent for some of the tenants. So you come in and say, hey, there's all these storage units. We can charge extra $50, $100 a month and really drive that other income. This is a big one. It's called the RUBS, Ratio Utility Billing System. These are being implemented a lot more frequently. The only time you probably won't see a RUBS in place is if it's a newer property that's individually metered, or if it's an older property that has been mom and pop owned for quite a while. So what the RUBS is it's a system that you implement to bill back the tenants for the amount of the water that they use. If it's a master metered electricity, you're billing back some of that electricity, sewer, trash. Those are some of the things that you can bill back to the tenants to decrease that expense. Washer and dryer rentals is another big one. So a lot of the properties that we work on and that we purchase have these already in place. They have washer and dryer hookups, but they may not have the washer and dryer units. And so one of our partners in Texas, what they do is they offer these machines for a rental fee of like $45. Here's the thing. The ownership team is not buying, they're not buying these washers and dryers. They're working with a company that's leasing them to the property management for, we'll say, $40 a month. And then the property management, the property is renting them to the tenants for $45 a month. So they're making $5 for every set that those tenants use. And since the management team is leasing these from another company, they're not covering the maintenance, they're not covering the repairs, because that is all taken care of through the leasing company. So another way to drive your other income. And this was another one. You'll see it sometimes you won't, but just another fun idea. Vending machines. You throw in some vending machines in the clubhouse, the sodas, energy drinks, some cold Starbucks drinks, some snacks. It's another way to add an amenity to that space, a feature, and drive some of the other income. Now, as I mentioned, not all of these may be appropriate for a property. You might need to pick and choose. And something you got to keep in mind too is the affordability. If you're driving rent, we'll say $100 a month, but you have $300 in fees, good luck. Good luck trying to capture all of that. So you've got to know what's typical in that area. What are some of the nearby properties doing? But if you can collect on average an extra, we'll say $75 a month on average, and you're at a 200 unit property. Let's do this math real quick. $75 a month times 200 units, that's $15,000 a month. And to figure out the value, that's annualized. So $15,000 a month times 12, that's $180,000 of other income. Now let's divide that by the 5% cap rate we've been using. You just increase the value of that property $3.6 million at a 5% cap because you implemented some other income. That is the power of multifamily real estate. This is the power of the value add business plan. And that's why so many operators focus on this strategy. Because if you can significantly increase the value of that property, it improves the quality of living for the tenants, and it enables you and the investors to be able to capitalize that on the back end because you're forcing that value, forcing that appreciation. And that's all I got for you today. So talking a little bit about the value add business play, but more specifically, different strategies and ways to boost that other income. Looks like there's a couple comments here. Bruce, were you just replying to Amanda?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Barbara, are you updating or improving the interior of the rental unit? Yes, that's typically always the case. So most projects in a light value add, you'll see anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 that goes into each unit. And that might update the flooring, cabinets, put in granite countertops, fresh paint. So that's almost always the case, is to start with the unit renovations. Great question. Anything else? Awesome, folks. Well, thanks again for tuning in to another Rev Real Estate Live. Again, we do these every single week, and we pick apart different aspects of the apartment investing vehicle, if you will. And we just pull the curtain back on everything that we look at as a team and questions that you should be asking as an investor. So appreciate you tuning in. We actually do have an opportunity that we're about to launch next week. So if you're not part of our email list, if you haven't heard about that yet, make sure you sign up in our portal. Make sure you sign up in our portal. We can throw the link here in the chat box. Thanks, Hillary, for throwing that in. So rev.invportal.com/sign up, get into that portal and just initiate. Let's start having a conversation to see if there's an opportunity for us to work together in the near future. But hopefully this was helpful. Appreciate you all tuning in today, and we'll catch you next week on the next Rev Real Estate Live. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dylan.